Florida State Prison, Rayford, April 30th, 2025. A name sits on paper at the warden's desk: Jeffrey Glenn Hutchinson. His death warrant was signed weeks earlier by Governor Ron DeSantis. All his appeals had already been filed, and they had all been declined. And with the final legal doors shut, the state of Florida was moving forward. The clock was set. In 24 hours at 6 p.m. tomorrow, more than 26 years after his crimes, Jeff would be executed by lethal injection for murdering his girlfriend Renee Flaherty and her 3 children inside their family home in Crestview. Death Watch begins. Jeff is placed in a Death Watch cell close to the execution chamber, with even less privacy and more frequent checks than regular death row cells. His day ends the same way it does in every case like this, with control, observation, and routine. The night passes slowly. Jeff tries to sleep, but that doesn't come easy on Death Watch. It never does. The lights stay on, and guards check on him every 15 minutes. There is no real rest, just waiting for the hours to burn down. On May 1st, Jeff woke up at 4:30 a.m. For his final meal, he requested salmon and mahi-mahi, along with asparagus, a baked potato, and iced tea. His last meal arrived, and he ate it without complaint. Staff noted he finished most of it. No drama, just a man eating breakfast on the last morning of his life. Jeff is granted one final visit. According to the official logs, his sister walks in at 11 a.m., together with an in-law and one of Jeff's friends. They meet in the visitation room and talk for hours. Later, his lawyers come in to say a final goodbye. In the last days, they had filed appeal after appeal at both the state and federal level, but all were denied. After 26 years, their fight is over. There is nothing left to do but wait, as the clock is quietly ticking toward his execution. But Jeff's story didn't begin in that cell. It began decades earlier, hundreds of miles away, long before anyone imagined the word death row would ever be attached to his name. Jeffrey Glenn Hutchinson was born on November 6, 1962, in Alaska. He grew up in Kettle Falls, Washington, in a large family with several brothers and sisters. People who spoke about his early years did not describe a childhood that looked like a warning sign for what came later, although there were reports that he was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid. And like a lot of kids, he simply grew up and tried to find his place in the world. After high school, he worked regular jobs. He worked as a mechanic, as a security guard, and by many accounts, he was capable and dependable when he chose to be. But then he joined the U.S. Army, and his path changed. He became a paratrooper and an Army Ranger. Later, he went overseas and fought in the Gulf War, including Operation Desert Storm. When he returned home, his family said they could see the difference. They described a mental strain that settled in after service, and they described a man who struggled to carry what he had lived through. Over time, his personal life reflected that struggle. His marriages ended, and his stability did not hold. Eventually, he met Renee Flaherty, a 32-year-old mother of 3, in Washington. Within months, they ended up moving to Florida together so Jeff could start his own motorcycle shop, and the household became a blended family, with Renee's children living under the same roof as Jeff. From the outside, their home seemed peaceful. Jeff and Renee had what looked like a good relationship. He cared about the kids, treated them like they were his own. He played with them, helped raise them, and was a part of their everyday lives. He loved the kids, he loved Renee. At least, that's what everyone thought. As they packed up to leave Washington, Renee's brother Wesley Elmore told him, "Take care of my sister and her kids." And Jeff responded, "I will. I love your sister." But just 9 months later, on September 11, 1998, everything that looked normal collapsed in a single hour. That evening, an argument broke out between Jeff and Renee, and it was serious enough that Jeff packed clothing and guns into his truck and he left and went to a bar. Here, he drank, and he told the bartender he was angry with his girlfriend. He told him that Renee was pissed off, and they just needed time to cool down. At the same time, Renee reached out to a friend, trying to explain what had happened and trying to steady herself after the fight. When the friend asked what happened, Renee told her that it was bad, that they had a big fight. She said Jeff packed up his truck, loaded some of his clothes and guns, and left. "He's gone," she said. But he didn't stay gone for long. Less than an hour after he left that bar, Jeff returned to the house with a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun and walked back through the door. Inside that home in Crestview, Renee and her 3 children were killed execution style. He found Jeffrey first, the oldest at just 9 years old. Jeff shot him in the chest, but the boy didn't die right away. So he stood over him and fired again, this time a bullet to the head. Amanda, 7 years old, and Logan, only 4, never stood a chance. Each of them was killed with a single shotgun blast, ending their lives in an instant. After it was over, Jeff picked up the phone, called 911 and said, "Yes, ma'am, I just shot my family. I love my family. Ma'am, I love my family." When officers arrived at the house, they found him sitting in the garage with a phone in his hand, still connected to the 911 operator. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He just stood up and let them take him in. Inside, the horror waited. Renee and her youngest 2, Amanda and Logan, were found together in the bedroom. Jeffrey's body lay in the living room, alone. At first, Jeff told a strange story. He claimed 2 men wearing ski masks had broken in, killed everyone, and ran off. He said he tried to fight them off, but failed. But the evidence told a different story. Police found gunshot residue on Jeff's hands. They also found shotgun shells on the kitchen counter, and tissue from Jeffrey's body was found on his leg. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone else stepping inside that night. Everything pointed to one person, Jeffrey Hutchinson. As the case moved toward trial, the state's argument stayed direct, which was that there was no credible alternative suspect and no credible break-in narrative that fit what the police found. Jeff was found guilty of all 4 murders. He received life in prison for the murder of Renee and 3 death sentences for the murders of the children because of their young age. After finishing his final meal, Jeff filed multiple requests for stays of execution, which were all rejected within hours. When the final visits were over, around 3 p.m., he filed a final request for a stay through his lawyers, stating that he wasn't mentally competent to be executed. At the 3:30 p.m. press conference, state officials stepped before the cameras, and FDOC spokesman Ted Veerman confirmed the basics. He said Jeff had been awake since 4:30 a.m., that he had his last meal, and his final visits had been completed. However, due to a last-minute request for a stay, the execution might be delayed for several hours. But according to him, Jeff was overall calm and compliant. Outside the prison, reactions were split. A small group gathered to protest the execution. They argued the case had too many holes, too many unanswered questions. That doubt should mean life, not death. Over the years, Jeff consistently claimed to be innocent. According to his niece, Natalie Hutchinson, the case began to feel less certain the longer she looked at it. There was no DNA linking. There was blood spatter on the bottom of his feet, but it wasn't smeared. The murder weapon was broken. And the main piece of evidence is the 911 call, but it doesn't add up. It wasn't his voice, she said. To the family, those details weren't small inconsistencies, they were cracks running through the foundation of the case. In an effort to make people listen, the family later released the 911 call audio on TikTok, hoping others would hear what they heard. The voice on the line carried a slight southern accent, something the family said didn't match Jeff at all. While people at trial identified the voice as his brothers pushed back, saying Jeff rarely, if ever, used the word ma'am. Jeff also told his family that the gunshot residue found on him came from fighting with intruders that night, not from pulling the trigger himself. When asked to respond, Florida attorneys involved in Jeff's case declined to comment. For Robert, one of his brothers, the issue was never blind loyalty, it was about truth. "If I thought Jeff did it, he would get what's coming, but he didn't do it. He's a stand-up person that fought for this country," he said. "If you look at the court records, he did it. But when you know more about it, nothing makes sense." At Florida State Prison, the preparations continued. Witnesses were assembled and the execution chamber became active. At around 5 p.m., officials had begun the final preparations. Jeff was given fresh clothing and escorted to a small adjacent room where he would be prepped for the procedure. At exactly 6 p.m., Jeff was led into the execution chamber and strapped to the gurney. Medical staff inserted the IV lines into his arms. 2 lines, one in each arm, as a backup in case one failed. He didn't resist, didn't flinch, just laid still and let them do their job. In the witness room, people took their seats. Family members of the victims sat together, some holding hands, others sitting in silence. Reporters filled the rest of the seats. They all waited for the curtains to open. At 7 p.m., his final appeal was denied, and the execution was able to proceed as planned. The warden stepped forward and read the death warrant aloud. Then he turned to Jeff and asked if he had any final words. Jeff said nothing. No statement, no apology, no proclamation of innocence, just silence. But as the process began, witnesses saw his lips move, soft, almost inaudible, as if he were talking to himself or whispering a prayer. No one heard what he said. Maybe it was meant for no one but himself. The warden gave the signal. The chemicals began to flow: sodium thiopental, pancuronium bromide, potassium chloride. Jeff's legs shook sporadically, and he seemed to have body spasms for several minutes before falling still. The process took a little more than 15 minutes. At 8:14 p.m., Jeffrey Hutchinson, age 62, was pronounced dead. Executed exactly as planned. What do you think? Has justice been served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.